Hello, everyone. We should be live now. Welcome to my introduction. Yep, here we go. Yes, hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Patricia Meredith, and we are live. I'm going to introduce myself via my bookshelves to you today. I am so excited to see some folks here live, so be sure to say hello. My plan, as you'll see along the bottom, is I'm going to introduce myself via certain sections of my bookshelves, and I'll pause between those sections so that way I can check and see if there's any questions specifically geared toward me and my books, and then I'll answer those at that time. And then at the end, we'll also have some time for some questions and answers. So hello, everybody. I am so excited to see everybody here. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Patricia Meredith, and I am an author of historical mystery. I am currently based out of Colorado Springs, actually a little bit south of there in Fountain. But we just lived the last 8 years in Spokane, Washington, and that is important, and you'll see why in a second if you're not familiar with my books. So first, a little bit about me. I started as I started writing when I was 9 years old. I was always fascinated by mystery, and so it's no surprise that that's the route I ended up going once I hit publication. However, I've also always been fascinated by historical fiction. And so the first thing that I actually ever published was a short story featured in Christmas Fiction Off the Beaten Path, and it came out in 2019. My story is the first one in there, so it's easy to find. It's called Mary, Did You Know? And it was a Christmas short story featuring Mary, the mother of Jesus. And it kind of takes a more, if you're familiar with The Chosen, it takes a more chosen aspect look at it as she was a mom, he was a baby. Let's see what happened while he was growing up and intertwining that with the biblical story. So that is my historical fiction. A couple years later, I took the dive and I went and started my series of historical mysteries. And those are the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries. And the first one is Butcher, Baker, Candlestick Taker. The second one is Cupboards All Bared, and Crazy Maids in a Row, just released last October. So it's only been out for a couple months. So those are just the first 3 books in the series. My plan is to write 12 plus books in the series in total, but don't let that scare you away. If you are interested in starting a new series, now is the time, because I am separating them, because it's 12 books, I'm separating them into 4 arcs of 3. So that way you can read these 3, take a break. I'm currently working on book 4, and then I'll be releasing 4, 5, and 6 right in a row, just like I did with these ones every 6 months, starting this October. And then my current work in progress is about Anna Katharine Green, which is, she is considered the mother of the American detective genre. In the way that Edgar Allan Poe is considered the father of the American detective genre, even though his detective was actually French. Dupont is not an American detective. So you will find some other mysteries written by even women before Anna Katharine Green, but she's considered the mother because her first book, The Leavenworth Case, was a blockbuster hit overnight, and nobody expected it because it was not only written by a woman, but she published it under her own name, Anna Katharine Green. She didn't use a pseudonym, which up until then, a lot of women had done. So her story takes place in 1870s New York. She's writing the Leavenworth Case, and you'll just have to see what happens in my historical fiction mystery with her story. So I realized I actually didn't really explain the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries are set in Gilded Age Spokane in 1901. The main character is Archie Prescott, who is a clock designer. One of the most iconic locations in Spokane, if you ever go there, is the clock tower in Riverfront Park, and it is all that remains of the Great Northern Railroad Depot, which unfortunately the rest of it was torn down. But it's one of those things that you'll see on postcards, you'll see it on t-shirts, you'll see it everywhere in Spokane. And when I discovered that it was built in 1901, I started getting inspired for the story. So if you're interested in learning more about those, I actually have several videos that I've already posted over the last couple years with book trailers and behind the scenes and history of these books and readings of these books. So definitely check those out. More of that will be happening this year as we lead up to the launch of book 4 as well. So these are my books, and now all the books that have inspired who I am as a person, as a writer, and that have brought me to this point today. That's what I wanted to really focus on with these bookshelves. I fully believe that the phrase, "you can tell a lot about a person from their bookshelves," is an absolute truism. I actually included it in my books, and I will definitely be including it in this one because I think it's so true. One of the first things I do when I meet someone new, when I go to their house for the first time, is I check out their bookshelves, right? I run in, look at their bookshelves. Oh, I love that book. Oh, that's one of my favorites too, you know? And then you immediately have a conversation starter, right? What better way to start a conversation than with books? So that's what I wanted to do today. Again, thank you everybody who's commenting in the live chat. That is awesome. So glad to see you. So, all right, I'm going to introduce my first section. So the first one I wanted to talk about was my 19th century books, of course, my old books. So what I've got here is William Shakespeare, who of course is influential. I don't know any author who doesn't say Shakespeare isn't influential. But I wanted to take a pause here on the complete stories of Edgar Allan Poe. If you have read my books, you will see that I have included quotes from Poe in all 3 of my books. Like I said, he was considered the father of the American detective novel. So his influence, even though he technically only wrote 2 detective mysteries, he wrote 3 mysteries. Dupin with the Murder on the Rue Morgue is the considered the first one. And again, that's American. That is not including British or Japanese or Chinese or Indian or even South American. There are lots of people writing, but because I am an American, I have primarily started my adventure into mystery and into the classic world via American authors and British authors. Though I have recently discovered French authors, and we'll get there because those are pretty cool and also extremely influential. So Edgar Allan Poe, absolutely hands down wonderful. And you'll definitely see a lot more of him sprinkled out throughout my books because he's easy to reference, just like Sherlock Holmes. Everybody kind of has a basic understanding of who Poe was and some of his stories. So I love to include references to his books and his stories and his characters. You'll find that I don't like all of Poe's books. And in fact, I put that into some of my characters. Some of my characters agree with me. Some of my characters don't agree with me. And that's not necessarily up to me. So one of my most recent finds and gifts at Christmas time from one of my wonderful, incredible friends was The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady. And if you've never heard of this, this is something that I stumbled across in my research. It's an actual diary from a woman named Edith Holden from 1906. And what they've done is they have made a facsimile of her diary and reprinted it in such wonderful, I mean, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. So you can see, like, that's her actual handwriting. This is not typeset. This is, they scanned the images and they made it into this beautiful book. And look at her illustrations. Look at her drawings. These are hand drawn by her. And I'm just fascinated by that. And what she's done is she's included quotes and thoughts from each month. So as you go through, she'll include, she's got her diary. So she's got what she did and, you know, who she's watching and these beautiful illustrations. They remind me a lot of Beatrix Potter. If you research her and what she would do, you know, during the day and how her illustrations came to be, it's a lot like Edith Holden. It's amazing. So she is based in Britain, which is why she refers to herself as Edwardian. And if you're wondering, Victorian versus Edwardian, so it switches over in 1901. In 1901, January of 1901, Queen Victoria died in England, and it became the Edwardian age when her son took over. He was only king, though, for 10 years. So technically, the Edwardian age only exists from 1901 to 1910. because I'm an American, technically it's the Gilded Age. And so when I'm focusing on these characters, I try to refer to it as the Gilded Age, but even in America, it was very common to refer to it as Victorian or Edwardian, because even though we were separate from England, it's still, it influenced us a lot. Our culture is very, very influenced by British culture. So this is another of my absolute favorites, and it's another one that I have referenced in my books, and I'll be talking a lot more about in Anna Catherine Green's book. This is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, and you might have heard of this. There was actually they made a mini series of it on BBC. At one point. I highly recommend it. It was really, really good, and it was actually really close to the book. I appreciate that. I'm an author. I usually will say I prefer the book over the movie. In this case, it was honestly a toss-up. It was very well done. The costuming was incredible. And again, we're introduced to one of the first detectives ever invented, and that was by Wilkie Collins. What's fun about this book is that it is epistolary, but also not epistolary. It is a collection of the main character is collecting diary entries and letters and manifests. They're writing down what they think happened the night of the mystery. So what happens is a jewel is stolen. And I won't say too much more than that, because I will go into this a little bit more in another vlog, because like I said, Wilkie Collins was actually very influential to Anna Catherine Green. So if you might have heard of him with The Woman in White. That's probably his most well-known one. It's another one they made into a mini-series. There's one other one of his that is usually commonly known. But The Moonstone is referenced by Agatha Christie in her autobiography. She actually talks quite a bit about Wilkie Collins. He was very influential. He is credited with inventing the locked room mystery. And like I said, he's also credited with one of the first detectives. This detective actually works on the police force. So, and again, so does Dupont. So it's interesting to see, when does the amateur detective really come out, and you'll actually see that with Anna Catherine Green. So more on her. Obviously, I'm very, very excited about her. So Wilkie Collins, The Moonstone, absolutely check it out if you haven't ever read it before. The Great Train Robbery by Michael Crichton. I love Michael Crichton. You'll see him down here later in my non-mystery books. Timeline is one of my favorite books by him. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So we'll get into that a little bit more. That one's by Robert Louis Stevenson. That one also is mentioned many times in my books. And if you read them, you know why. That's all I'll say for now. I will be doing a live discussion of the reading of Jekyll and Hyde with a fellow booktuber, Tori Talks. I will link to her show down in the show notes, but definitely check out her channel. She primarily reads science fiction and fantasy, but she did me the honor of reading my books and absolutely loved them. So we've been having some incredible discussions, and so I'm very excited to talk with her where we cross over. She's reading some classics this year. One of them was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I said, okay, we need to discuss this book together because it is incredibly influential to my books and to a lot of books. It's one of those books that today you probably know the twist, right? But it was taken very differently when it was written and when it was published. So A Tale of Two Cities is my absolute favorite by Dickens. I prefer it over even A Christmas Carol. Actually, I love A Tale of Two Cities. It's one of those books that I discovered in high school, and it just influenced the rest of my life. So Kenneth Grahame, Wind in the Willows, and A.A. Milne. I will talk a little bit more about them when I get into my children's section, but I just wanted to show off my beautiful collection here. This is actually a second edition of the original Winnie the Pooh. I picked this up when my husband and I went to Hay on Wye, which is in Wales. It is considered the book capital of the world. If you go there, there are 33, maybe more now, because this was several years ago, 33 different bookstores, one of which is in a castle. So we just spent, several days just shopping for books, and it was just breathtaking. So many amazing stores there. So Winnie the Pooh is considered probably my all-time favorite book. Yeah, I think I'm going to say it. It's my all-time favorite book. It is the book that got me creating stories as a child, which is so important. My kids today love reading and rereading Winnie the Pooh. I love listening to the audiobooks. I love watching the cartoon. But the book itself is so witty. When you go back and reread it as an adult, you just find so many incredible things intertwined into it. His character creation is actually really interesting. Yeah, Winnie the Pooh, not to be overlooked. So I'll go ahead and jump ahead a little bit. I have a lot of older books. If you have any questions about any of these, if you can see them, I'll be reading from the Christmas Stories collection next year. That's one of my goals. I have the New Century Speaker and Writer. These are etiquette books from 1901, around 1901. I have my collection of cookbooks. And if you're interested in more about 19th century cookbooks, I have 6 videos now of baking from 19th century cookbooks. And then actually the last Saturday of this month, I'll be joined by Amy Marie, who is another fellow booktuber who did me the honor of reading my book. She's actually reading book 2 right now. So let's see what she thinks of the next one. But she absolutely loved the first one. So we were talking about how she loves reading books with recipes intertwined. And I said, well, what if we do a bake along together? So that will be the last Saturday of this month. We'll be going live together, baking in our own kitchens, and we'll be baking a recipe that is featured in my books. Actually, in the very first one, Mrs. Curry, my cook, she loves to bake recipes out of 19th century cookbooks. And she'll be, one of her specialties is lemon rosemary cupcakes, lemon rosemary muffins. And so we'll be sharing from that at the end of this month. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my later videos. So let's see, what do we have over here? We have more just classics, The Fairy World by Hans Christian Andersen. I am absolutely inspired by Grimm fairy tales and Andersen stories. Again, you might see that in my books. And we can get a little bit more into that in a minute. Okay, I think that's 19th century cookbooks. So let me just take a peek real quick. And so hello to my darling children who are watching with their grandparents. They're leaving me messages as well. I love you guys so much. Just to be clear, I am a mom and I do write. So that's something else that you'll see in some vlogs later on this month. I would love to talk more about what does that look like and how does children's literature inspire what I write today, which is not for children, but it does impact how clean and how I am writing books that I hope that my children can read someday in the future. So yes, thank you, Anne, so much for sending that country diary. I'm so excited about that. Would you like your mysteries turned into movies? That's actually a really hard question because some books turn into movies. They've turned out really, really well. I would argue Lord of the Rings is one of those where I'm currently actually re-listening to it. And I really appreciate the choices that Peter Jackson made in making the movie. I am a Tolkien fanatic and I am a Lord of the Rings fanatic. But I was introduced via the films, and rereading the book now, having seen the films, and I mean, I practically know them by heart. We're watching the appendices. Like, I mean, I love Lord of the Rings. He did a really good job with it. That being said, there are a lot of movies that I would say don't do the books justice. In general, I would say it's a very different medium. So yes, I would love to see my books made into movies, especially because they are set in a real historical location. And I purposely chose places in Spokane that you can still visit today. So for example, the second book takes place near the Campbell House in Spokane, and that still exists. And so it would be so cool if they could actually film the book in the Campbell House, right? I mean, that would just give me goosebumps. It'd be amazing. But I would definitely have some thoughts on how they revealed my characters and things like that. So we'll see. Who knows what's down the pipeline? How do you go about coming up with your ideas and then develop them? Well, I just realized I think I can actually share these. So there's that question. And then here's this one. So coming up with your ideas and then develop them. So because I am primarily historical based, I generally start with my research and then I'm inspired by that. So in fact, I almost forgot that with my 19th century books. This is something that was gifted to me this year by my wonderful parents-in-law, Renee and Scott, who are incredible. This is one of 5 collections of actual articles published in 1901 in Spokane. So there were 2 main newspapers, the Spokesman Review and the Spokane Chronicle. I have all of 1901 from the Chronicle. There's the Chronicle, Spokane Daily Chronicle, because of my incredible parents-in-law. And then I have a couple months from the Spokesman Review in 1901. They're actually the primary months that I'm working on right now, which is very exciting. So what these are the actual newspapers. Let me see if I can lift this like that. So no more just looking on the internet for me. I can actually flip through and read everything that was published on that day historically. So sometimes there are ads that are influential. Sometimes there's murders. There's thievery. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I love thieves. I love rogue stories. One of my main characters in the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries is the Red Rogue. So I am greatly influenced by newspaper articles. The entire story of book 2 comes out of finding out that President McKinley was supposed to come to Spokane in 1901, in May of 1901. Because each of these books is taking place in a different month in 1901. So this is April, May, June, currently working on July. And that's been really fun because my goal is throughout the series, you'll see Spokane through each of the months of the year in 1901. So I've even gone so far as I check the weather in the paper. Let's assume that they were kind of accurate, though sometimes I go off it and I make a comment about it, oh, well, the paper said it was supposed to be clear today and it's raining, because when has the weather ever been right? Nothing changes in history. There's nothing new under the sun. But I have gone so far as looking at the weather and having that inspire events in the books. So that's really fun. But yeah, so that's how I'm inspired. All right. How much do you enjoy writing, and do you have pictures in your books? I don't have pictures in my books, but as my kids know, I started by writing children's books, and some of the things that I intend to share in my vlogs over the next year is I want to share some of my original stories, my original mysteries, and just for you to see where it comes from, right? That writing has been my life since I was 9, since even before that, right? Because I was read books. So, and we'll get into that more with the children's books. Since I keep talking about it, let me just go ahead and do that. So down here, I have my children's book collection. So Wind in the Willows again, but this one is, so my husband actually collects Wind in the Willows. And we have, I think, 36 different editions now. We try to get different ones with different illustrations, because the fun thing about Wind in the Willows versus like Winnie the Pooh is always the E.H. Shepard illustrations. Well, Wind in the Willows, you can find endless versions of it with different illustrations. Well, this one is the Arthur Rackham ones, for example, like that. Just beautiful. So Rackham is most well known for doing Alice in Wonderland, but he did just some incredible illustrations. Beautiful, beautiful. So I wanted to show that to you guys. That's why I left that out here. So some of my favorite children's books, and again, over this next year, one of the things I want to talk about is children's mysteries, because there's been some movement in that. I actually, a couple years ago, when I started writing the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, I was thinking, oh, there's no mysteries for kids other than like Encyclopedia Brown. And then you move up into the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. Now, those are fabulous books, and you can read them pretty young. However, there's been a lot added to that. There's been a great movement towards mystery in children's books. And so I'll be featuring some lists of my favorite ones that we're reading with my kids. But some other series that are just influential to me. Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. That whole series is incredible. She has several different books. She's a German author, so it's really fun reading them because they've been translated into English, and sometimes it's slightly off. The language is just slightly different. Inkheart, though, is a love letter to books. And if you were ruined by seeing the movie, that is one of those examples of movies that I do not think did the book justice. Now, to be fair, it is a book about books. So a movie about books, it's just not going to land the same way. Incredible series. Alice in Wonderland. So Alice in Wonderland was published pre my time period. So I'm able to talk about it a lot. Wizard of Oz is another one. Wizard of Oz I know was published in 1900. I forget when Alice in Wonderland was published off the top of my head. But this series by Frank Better, speaking of books that need to be made into movies, the rumor is they're going to finally do that. The Looking Glass Wars. Incredible series. A retelling of Alice in Wonderland with what if it was real? What if Wonderland was real? And it's twisted and fantastical and just beautiful. Alice in Wonderland is one of those books that I honestly did not like as a child. I didn't like the Disney movie. I thought it was too weird. It was too bizarre, which is funny considering what I write now. But as a college student, I took a children's literature course. I graduated from Whitworth University with a creative writing degree. So shout out to Whitworth. Awesome. It's an amazing college in Spokane. So I took a children's literature course, and one of the things we studied was Alice in Wonderland. I have my annotated version here somewhere over here. So this is the annotated version. If you're ever going to read Alice in Wonderland, I highly recommend reading it annotated because it explains all the references. So all the things you're like, that is just so bizarre. Well, actually, that's a direct reference to something that they were being taught at that time in school. And I think that's just fascinating. It's like, oh, it's actually a lot more brilliant than I thought it was. It's not just bizarre for bizarreness' sake, right? It's actually really, really awesome. So that series. Castle in the Attic, Mix Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankweiler, Chasing Vermeer. This is one I'll definitely be featuring in my mystery list. I have the first two here. I think there's 4 or 5 out now. Chasing Vermeer is cool because, and my kids will know this, it's not only a mystery book, it incorporates mysteries that you have to solve. For example, there is throughout the whole thing, for one thing, they talk about pentaminos, which are very cool, something you can study in homeschool. Obviously, we're homeschoolers. Let's see, the challenge to the reader. Yeah, there it is. So there's a creature and a code hidden in the images throughout the book. And so, and it has to do with pentaminos. And it spells something, and it's a whole code, and it has to do with a coded message that has to do in the middle of the book. And so not only are you trying to solve the mystery with with the kids as they're going through, but there's like actual puzzles incorporated, which also is like the Mysterious Benedict Society, which is another one that I don't think the TV series did it justice. But again, it has to be read because it's just, there's so much nuance to the characters and everything. And the book series is just incredible. Mysterious Benedict Society, amazing. And again, it incorporates puzzles. Very, very good. Sisters Grimm. Sisters Grimm is outright detective mystery. In fact, I think the first one's called, The Fairy Tale Detectives. Another incredible series, incorporates Grimm fairy tales. I'll be going into that more in another video. Half Magic Anything by Edward Eger. Absolutely love those. Ella Enchanted is one of my favorite versions. No, it is my favorite version of Cinderella. Absolutely love that one. The Phantom Toll Booth, which I actually just finished rereading with my kids. You can see how beat up it is. I absolutely love this one. This one is playing with literature and numbers, and it's all the meanings of things is twisted. And if you want an Alice in Wonderland that makes sense to modern readers, Phantom Toll Booth. It's bizarre, but you get it. It's very, very good. So Mary Poppins and Time Stops for No Mouse, the whole by Michael Hoey. This whole series, Hermux Tantamouch, a mouse who's solving mysteries. It's very rescuers down under, those stories with mice solving the mysteries. So those are excellent. Okay, so I'll pause there. So that's children's literature. Like I said, I'll be going into that more. Another reminder to go ahead and push that subscribe button. If you're interested in learning more, yes, love the Looking Glass Wars. Absolutely. Let's see. Phantom Tollbooth, Inkheart. Yes, Hardy Boys and Scooby-Doo. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, Harriet the Spy. Absolutely. Narnia. Yep, I'm getting to Narnia. Okay, so children's books are just so much fun to look through. So let's see. Okay. Okay, we're doing all right on time. We're half an hour in. Okay, so let's start with, let's see, I haven't looked at my actual research books. I did want to take a minute and look at those. That's what's down here. This is primarily research into 1901 at this point, because that's what I'm writing. That's what I wear, as I try to focus on 1901 time period. So some of my main influences for researching my historical mystery books, Life Behind the Badge, which is the history of the Spokane Police Department. And there's actually 4 or 5 volumes. Absolutely incredibly helpful. This one, of course, is about the very beginning, and so it crosses over with 1901. So this is where I found my detectives. All of my main characters in my series are made up, because then I can do whatever I want to them. But everybody that they cross over with, for example, every other person that my detectives work with in the police department, the chief, the sergeant, the lieutenant, everybody is an actual person from history, which is so much fun, right? To incorporate real people from history. So let's see, Dear Mother. Okay, this is another one that I'm probably going to do a whole separate video about. Dear Mother. Oh, precious, precious Dear Mother. This is another one like that Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady. These are actual letters that a man, Marinus Cromlin, wrote home to his mother in 1901 from Spokane. He came to Spokane from Amsterdam in 1901. He was there from October 1901 to 1902, when he unfortunately got sick and had to go home. Well, that's exactly the time period I'm writing in. I'm writing in May of 1901 to June of 1902. So not only does this give me a look at Spokane in 1901 from a first-person viewpoint, it's from an outsider. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but outsiders tend to notice more about their surroundings, right? Think about it. If you've ever traveled outside of your hometown, you notice things that the people who live there probably don't notice, right? I mean, for one, I love coming back to Colorado now to live here, but I know I'm very quickly going to get used to the mountains. But that was a thing that it was like, okay, we're moving back to Colorado. We're going to be right next to the mountains. I love the mountains, but it's so easy to get used to them, and you forget how beautiful they are, right? Well, he came to Spokane, and so he has thoughts, some of them not always positive, about Spokane at that time period. Not only is he writing letters home, but you might have just seen he was a photographer. So he took pictures of people inside their homes. I mean, right there, you've got even the woman walking up the staircase, right? He caught her in her everyday. This is probably sometime in the spring, because there's flowers everywhere. The Victorians were very big, Edwardians, Gilded Age. It was very big on nature. That's something else that I can talk about in some other videos, about the return to nature, and it tends to go in cycles. We are currently going through one, right? There is an upswing in the interest of nature because technology has come so far, right? And that tends to happen in history. Technology takes a big step up, so then people start, I'm afraid of technology, right? Or just, it's too much technology. I want to get back outside, right? I want to get back outside, especially after the pandemic. We're all just eager to get outside, right? Here's one of my favorite photographs of a train coming in. It is not a Great Northern. No, it is. It is a Great Northern. It is a Great Northern. That's the one I'm writing about. So there you go. It's fascinating. I am actually, this is another one of my favorite photographs because it's just every day, right? We've all been there, just sitting around with our friends, just chatting, and they've got the piano in there, and just everyday life. I love those reminders that, people have not changed, right? History, things around us have changed, but people themselves have not. I try to incorporate that in my books. So Dear Mother, one of my absolute favorite things that I own. It is not in print anymore. It's very hard to find. But like I started to say, I'm actually in contact with the family, the Cromlin family, and they have given me permission to feature Marinus in one of my future books, the one that's set in October or November. So that'll be really fun. He worked at the Phoenix Sawmill, so we'll have to have him murder at the Phoenix Sawmill. So there's Dear Mother. Let's see. Saga of a Western Town, Images of Greater Spokane. This is something else that is very, very precious to me. It was gifted to me by someone who came to one of my presentations in Spokane. She said, "Oh, I've got a copy. Could you use this? Because I never use it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." This is the Sears Roebuck catalog from 1902. And what you have to keep in mind with catalogs and with like phone books and things like that is if it was published in 1902, it's actually going to reflect the things that people were buying and things like that in 1901. Same with phone books, right? People are sending in their information from 1901 and it's being published in the 1902 version. But the Sears Roebuck catalog is so much fun because I can literally look through here. Here's safes, right? I mentioned that I have a thief. So here's safes. So I can literally look in here and then I can name an actual safe that was being used at that time. What's fun about the Sears Roebuck and what we have to keep in mind in our modern era is that it was Amazon. It changed life. Suddenly, I don't have to wonder what's the popular style in France, right? I can open this up and order it and have it delivered directly to my house, right? So here's, shirtwaists for men. So I can flip through here and see what are the styles that are being sold. Looking at women's dresses. It's just so cool. But that's another one that, I could do a whole video on that. It's so fascinating. And it impacts what I'm writing in so many ways. Lots of wonderful research books. Inside the Victorian Home by Judith Flanders. That's an excellent, excellent resource. Lots of Victorian costume. And I do tend to focus on Victorian costume, or I'll do like a whole history of costume. But Victorian because if you think about it, how many of us are actually wearing the most modern model, what's on the runway right now? We're not. We're wearing yesterday's styles, right? So there was a push to constantly update your styles and wear what was in season that year. But in America, it was not, okay, on the West Coast of America. Let me clarify that because it's absolutely different. That's what I'm finding when I'm writing Anna Katharine Green's in 1870s in New York. New York City was the hot spot, right? It was the hub of culture. It was, Ellis Island and everything. It was literally, where a lot of people came from. So they tended to be the most advanced, the closest. I mean, we still see that today. The coasts, the cities are going to be wearing what's in style more than the average person. And although Spokane was definitely up and coming and not Wild West like Earp, it's not that style, Tombstone. It's much more advanced than that. They have theater and they have, it's very advanced. It's one of those you're surprised when you start looking at it and you're like, wow, no, Spokane was definitely up and coming in 1901. In fact, it was competing with Seattle. I mean, everybody knows where Seattle is, right? Everyone has heard of Seattle. Not many people have heard of Spokane. Even Fraser mispronounces it as Spokane. It is Spokane. And it's interesting to see, even though it was so up and coming, what the styles were. And again, a lot of that comes out of my letters from Dear Mother because he'll talk about it. Now, he's a man. He doesn't notice it as much on the women, but he'll comment about shoes that he is buying. And he's always writing home asking his mom for money, nothing new under the sun, for more clothes. And he makes some interesting comments about like how Americans always buy new instead of mending things. And I would say that's still kind of true today, right? We tend to, I'll just buy a new one from the Sears Roebuck, right? It's cheaper that way. So let's see, Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, of course. And actually, I find more of my etiquette books and cookbooks online. A lot of them are being scanned in. I do have the ones that I actually own, which are very, very precious to me. But for searchability, if I'm like, oh, I really need a recipe for cornbread. The other day I was looking for one for cornbread. I looked up online. The Victorian Internet. This is another one that I really want to point out because if you are interested in history, this is fascinating. The Victorian Internet by Tom Standage is a look at how there's nothing new under the sun. What was the Victorian Internet? Well, it was the telegraph. And it goes into how it changed history again. It changed how people talk to each other. It's another book that points out the fact that in our modern day, right, we read our texts, our emails, and we're like, oh, we talk to each other so much more often than they did in the past. That's not true. In the past, the telegraph and the mail system were so on top of things. It was like getting a text. It was you could send somebody something, especially through the telegraph, and suddenly you could hear back from them within an hour. The mail was delivered 6 times a day, minimum. Now we're lucky if we see our mailman once a day, right? But 6 times a day, and then writing on the same piece of paper, that they'd write a note and then they'd send it through the mail, and then they'd hear back by the end of the day, if not earlier. It could be within an hour if they were just down the street from each other. So that's like, if you think about it, 6 times a day, that's probably how often I check my email. It's how often I should not be checking my email, but but texts, things like that. Yeah, probably about 6 times a day. So this is fascinating because it really makes you rethink about all of that and about how history has not come that far, right? It repeats itself a lot. So this is a really good one. And then there was Light. This is another wonderful autobiography. I'm going to ruin his name, Jacques Lucerne. He was the blind hero of the French Resistance. And if you've read my books, you know that I have a main character, Hayate Matsumoto, who is a blind inventor, a blind blacksmith. And that was something, again, I can talk more about that in another video. He's an incredible character. I love writing him. I would love to have a mystery where he is the main person solving it, having a blind detective. But this book was incredibly influential in the writing of his character. Deadly Doses. This is another one. If there are any other writers out there and you're like, how do I figure out how to poison somebody without getting in trouble on the internet? This book is one of the best ones. It's one of those, it's hard to find. It was gifted to me, and I'm very, 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 very thankful for the gift of this book because it is a writer's guide to poisons. So not only does it have, you can see how many I've marked, right? What's going to be happening in the future? So it goes by type of poison, and then in the back you can also reference it by, oh, I'm looking for a poison that causes these symptoms. So if I'm like, okay, I need somebody who thinks that they're going blind, but they're actually not, they're actually being poisoned by something here. It's an incredible resource. This is amazing. This is how let's see, which one did I just use it in? I think it was book 3. Crazy Maids in a Row. So hint, hint, there's some poisoning happening there. But incredible, incredible book. It's definitely going to be, I'm not Agatha Christie. I didn't get a chance to work in the dispensary, so I don't know firsthand poisons. But this definitely helps with that. And then these are just some of the influential books that I have read that have gotten me writing. I strongly recommend them. Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson, incredible. Your Blue Flame by Jennifer Fulwiler, especially as a mom looking for time to write. Her book, One Beautiful Dream, is the reason I started writing again. It gave me the courage to pursue my blue flame. What is it that makes me happy, that brings joy to other people and joy to myself in the work of it? Very, very good. Bandersnatch is actually about the Inklings, about Tolkien and Lewis and all of them. And it's a reminder of how we need community when we're writing. This is something that the Indie Accords, who I know I've seen a couple of people on there from Indie Accords. Thank you for tuning in. It's community is so important. And people say that we write alone, that it's a very lonely and solitary endeavor. It's not. It really isn't. I could not publish my books without the help of my editor, of my, which that's another thing, is being an editor with a background. The first rule of editing is you do not edit your own work. And the second rule is you do not edit your own work. And I can talk more about that actually next week. Next week, I'll be talking about my background editing science fiction and fantasy. Yeah, it's so encouraging to see the reminder that we need community around us when we're writing. It helps us keep going. So Subversive is about Dorothy L. Sayers, who was a contemporary of Agatha Christie and is often forgotten. She created Lord Peter Wimsey. Those murder mysteries, absolutely love them. And then Mother Detective Fiction is my main nonfiction source about Anna Catherine Green. So that was those. And we're getting low on time here. Let's see. And then there was Light. Why can't you edit your own work? Oh, when I see Catherine D. Graham is on here too, and she's an editor. So if you need an editor, go talk to her, because she's also an author, and she'll be the first to tell you this. So editing your own work, you can't see the problems. You're too close to it. It's too much a part of who you are, and all you can see is what you intended with the words. Whereas an editor is coming from the outside and can tell you what they are seeing in the words, and it is often very different than what you think you are saying through your words. So that, and which is also why I use beta readers. And again, I can talk more about that in another video. Beta readers, which many of whom I see on here, so thank you for tuning in. Beta readers is when you send out your book in its early stages, and it's basically a developmental edit. If you know the different steps of editing, developmental editors help you with the story. So a beta reader can look at it once you get down to the people who really are good at giving you those tips. They can help you see where the story is failing, especially writing mystery books. It is so helpful because sometimes I think that I am being very sneaky with who the murderer is, and my beta readers will say, "Oh no, I figured it out," right? Or they'll get to the end and it's, where did that come from, right? And you don't want that. You want to walk that fine line with mystery of oh, that's who it was. Of course, that makes absolute sense, right? They should be able to look back and see all of that. So having an editor is absolutely key. And then the proofreading just makes it cleaner. And I've done all the levels of editing. That was my background. I've done everything from the author pitch, from asking for author pitches, all the way to the final proofread and pushing that final button. So there's a lot of different editing stages, and every one of them is important if you want readers to read the words you have written and not be distracted by the little problems, right? Depends on the reader. Some readers will notice more problems than others, but for example, I also have expert readers for my books. I have a clockmaker, I have a blacksmith, I have a detective, a woman who works who actually wrote the book on the Spokane history. I have Spokane archivists who read my books to make sure that the history is correct, that the blacksmithing and things like that are correct. Because I would hate for somebody to pick it up and be distracted by the fact that, oh, that's not how you would actually do that, right? I want you to get so sucked into the story and into the characters that the details don't matter anymore, right? That they only influence your read even more. So All right. Exactly. Yeah. Page blindness. Your brain autocorrects errors. Exactly. Exactly. Um, and Catherine said she wouldn't edit her own either. Exactly. All right. So, okay, these are the ones that I'm really excited about. One of the things I really wanted to feature today was some of the non-mystery books that have influenced me, and then I'll end with mystery books. These are more of the science fiction fantasy type books, some of the historical mystery books, historical fiction books that have influenced me. Of course, Lord of the Rings, I've always talked about that, The Hobbit, P.G. Wodehouse. If you have not read any of his books, you've probably heard of Jeeves and Wooster, which is a TV show with Fry and Laurie, Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie, BBC, old, back when they were very, very young. That's actually one of those where the TV series, I've heard people say that they actually prefer the TV series over the books. I much prefer the books. P.G. Wodehouse is what I listen to in my head to make sure, so I'm listening to the audiobooks of those, to make sure that that kind of voice is in me when I'm writing my books. Even though he published in the 1930s, 40s, he has a very elevated writing style. He's British. And he's very, very witty and satirical. And I love that. And I want that to come through in my writing voice. And I found that what I'm listening to and what I'm reading really impacts how I write, how my writing comes through, right? So if I, like, for example, I have discovered I can no longer listen to Terry Pratchett when I'm writing, because then I start trying to be funny and I'm not funny like Pratchett. So, but I love reading Pratchett, right? Another one is Jasper Fforde, which I'll get into Jasper Fforde, one of my absolute favorite authors. But I can't read him or listen to him and be writing at the same time. I have to be editing or taking a break from writing for a little bit in order to thoroughly enjoy those, because otherwise I start trying to write like him and my writing style just isn't. My writing style I would compare to Dorothy L. Sayers. Other people have compared it for me to Dorothy L. Sayers, and I appreciate that comparison because I think it's very spot on. She is, and yeah, I'm honored to be compared to her. Beautiful, beautiful writing style. So Narnia, Peter Pan, Wizard of Oz, absolutely influential. Alison Weir. So Alison Weir is, she writes Tudor historical fiction. And I have found that I prefer her. I used to love Philippa Gregory, but I actually prefer Alison Weir now because she comes from a background as a biographer, as a historian. And because of that, her attention to detail when she is writing is so incredible and so influential. I want to be like that. I want you to not notice the extreme amount of details that are sprinkled throughout my books, right? They should be there, but they shouldn't be so obvious that they kick you out of the story, right? Info dumping is a thing. People will talk about that with writing fantasy too, right? I've created this entire world and I need to explain all of it to you in 3 extremely long books, or Sanderson, my first book is this big. But the same goes for historians. For a historical fiction author, it is so hard. I do so much history research. It's an iceberg, right? You get to see this much. There is this much underneath it. There is so much research that goes into these books. And you get to enjoy this part, which is why I started doing blogs on my website and vlogs talking about that history, because I think it's fascinating and I hope other people find it interesting too. So Stephen Lawhead is another one that I absolutely adore. He does an incredible job of incorporating Welsh history into his retelling of Robin Hood. And I specifically put these up here because if you read my books, you know that I absolutely love Robin Hood. He was actually my first crush, was the fox of the Disney version of Robin Hood. Absolutely love the story of Robin Hood. However, my favorite version of it, and unfortunately I don't have an actual copy of it, but my favorite version of the story is actually called Maid Marian by Thomas Love Peacock. And it was published prior to 1901 because I had my main character, whose name is Marian, reference him quite frequently. It's her favorite story to read. And she talks about why she loves that version of the story. It is a very, it's satirical and witty, and it's a great retelling of Robin Hood, and it's very Marian centric. So I love that. It's very, very good. And it probably was a point of interest for Lawhead. Having now read it and discovered it, I'm like, oh, that's where Lawhead got his idea for Marian. Great series. And then Ken Follett, Pillars of the Earth. Absolutely incredible series. Be ready with a handkerchief, though, because it'll drag you down. That's something else that you've probably noticed from the books that I have chosen is I tend not to read dark. I don't read horror. I don't read grimdark for the fantasy readers out there. I like not light and bubbly. I mean, I like serious. I like Lord of the Rings. I like that heaviness. But I have a very strong belief that there is hope in the world, that good will overcome evil, that there is something worth living for, Mr. Frodo, in this world. There's some good left in this world, and it is worth fighting for. One of my favorite quotes of all time. Okay. Oh, and then down here, these are others that are not mystery. I'm going to save mystery for last because that's my big one. So Michael Crichton with Timeline, To Kill a Mockingbird, one of my favorite books that I read in high school. The Princess Bride, absolutely love The Princess Bride. That's another one where I really love the movie, love the book. It depends on what you're looking for. They both have reasons why one is better than the other. So they kind of balance out. Absolutely love the book. Okay, Connie Willis, here we go. Connie Willis, my absolute all-time favorite author of all time, to the point that To Say Nothing of the Dog is a book that I currently have 2 copies of. I usually have 4 or 5 copies because every time I come across that book, I buy it in a bookstore because it's the book I gift to people that I'm like, okay, you haven't read Connie Willis. This is the book you need to read. To Say Nothing of the Dog. So this is a historical, it's a historical mystery. It's historical fiction romance in a P.G. Wodehouse type setting. In fact, she's compared to P.G. Wodehouse. It's if you've read Jerome K. Jerome's 3 Men in a Boat, that's what the title. It's so his book is called 3 Men in a Boat, To Say Nothing of the Dog. Her book is To Say Nothing of the Dog. It is time travel. So this is science fiction. She's known for her science fiction, but it's historical science fiction. So I appreciate it because she comes at it from I don't want to say a more realistic point of view. It's just, I like hard science fiction versus light science fiction, soft science fiction. So the difference there is hard science fiction is, it's based on actual science, like it could happen. So The Martian, right? Amazing book by Andy Weir. So amazing that NASA has actually used the book and him as a resource for creating their Mars program, right? It just, that's hard science fiction. William H. Keith, who I work with, I have his book right here, Free Fall. He writes hard science fiction, and I love that. Connie Willis is sometimes hard and sometimes soft. It's more her writing style is very witty and satirical, and she has thoughts on the world from let's take a step back and examine this. And it's just so good. It's just so good. I cannot recommend this book more. It is one of my favorite books of all time. Absolutely love it. When you look it up, you're going to see it's technically the second book in the series. The first one is Doomsday Book. However, like I said, this is the book that I give to everybody. Almost everybody has said, you don't need to read the other book. You don't need to. It might make some references to things that you're like, wait, I don't understand that. But you know what? Trust the author. She knows what she's talking about. Because really, you can just pick up this book and just read it, and you'll love me forever because it's the best book ever. I'll be meeting Connie Willis in person at Cosine in 2 weeks, which is the Colorado Springs Science Fiction Convention. So if you're local, definitely come to the science fiction convention and stop by and say hi to me and my husband. And you can come with me and meet Connie Willis. So excited. Let's see, I've got Les Mis over here. Absolutely love Les Mis. That's another one where, man, the musical, I don't know if I like the musical better than the book, but they both hit a spot, right? Oscar Wilde, love the importance of being earnest. So have you noticed? I love witty, funny. It sometimes comes through in my writing, but not a lot. Anne of Green Gables. So Anne of Green Gables is written in my time period. So the way she dresses definitely influences how I dress. Her story is so full of hope. It is my comfort read, right? In 2020, rereading Anne of Green Gables was what my heart needed. It's a wonderful story. And my favorite version of it, film-wise, would be the 1986 version. I forget the actress's name. But yeah, Anne of Green Gables, amazing. And Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And that's another one that is pre my time period, so I can reference it in my books. Absolutely influential, wonderful book if you've never read it. So, okay, before I dive into mystery and what really impacts me and my writing with mystery, any questions? Let me see. What's a writer's convention? A writer's convention, so cosign is technically not a writer's convention. It is technically a fan convention. The difference being a fan convention is for people who like science fiction and fantasy, and this one's actually horror as well. Thank you. Megan Fellows was the name of the actress in Anne of Green Gables. A writer's convention is going to be more panels about writing and publication, and you go in order to meet agents and to meet publishers. We are currently indie pubbing, so we're doing it ourselves, and we've really enjoyed that. And that's another thing that I can talk about in my vlogs about just the independent publication process. Making connections with fellow authors through things like Indie Accords on Discord, at writers conventions. It keeps you going, and it's so much fun being part of the indie community. I have more control over my art, over my characters, over where I want to go in the future. I can publish when the book is ready instead of having to wait for it to be approved by somebody somewhere. I really appreciate that. It is a lot of work, and the only reason we have gone that route is because of my background as an editor. And so I knew the steps that would be required in order to go there. So that's the difference between a writer's convention and a fan convention. So yes. So I have a tough time reading an author who never met a piece of research she didn't adore. Some true crime authors are guilty of this. Absolutely. And that's the hard part, is picking out what part of the iceberg am I going to reveal. And that being said, that is the only thing I would caveat with Connie Willis's her 2-part book, Blackout and All Clear. She had a hard time letting go of some of that research in that one. And I think that's why I love To Say Nothing of the Dog, because she does such a good job of only including the research that is absolutely necessary. And the rest of it is character and literature development. So yeah, right there. I know some of you are going to have to take off because it's been an hour, but hopefully you all can come back and catch my last part. So let me go ahead and do mystery. All right, influential mystery authors. Sherlock Holmes, of course. However, one of the vlogs I'll be doing later this month is going to be detectives that I like better than Sherlock Holmes. There are actually quite a few. I love Sherlock Holmes for who he is, but like I said, we have to remember he was inspired by somebody else's detective. He was not the first, nor is he the last in a long line of brilliant detectives. In fact, Sherlock is inspired by Anna Catherine Green's Detective Grace. And again, I can talk more about that later. But that being said, Sherlock is fun to quote, to reference in my books. I definitely have my main detective, Bernard, loves to quote Sherlock Holmes. He thinks he can do no wrong. And in that way, we can take lessons from that and learn. But the fun thing about Sherlock Holmes is he's one of those characters that most people are familiar with. Almost everybody has heard of Sherlock. They're familiar with a lot of the quotes, even if they're quotes that are misquotes. Elementary, my dear Watson, that kind of thing. He never actually says those lines. It's like quoting from Casablanca, where she never actually says, "Play it again, Sam." But it's one of those most oft quoted things in history. So that's why quoting from Sherlock and from Edgar Allan Poe is fun in my first books, because everybody knows, kind of, almost everybody. Usually if you're picking up a historical mystery, you probably are familiar with those two people and their writing. And then I can introduce you to other ones and get you inspired to read some other ones. Dashiell Hammett is another main one. My cozy mystery series that I'm still working on, so it's not don't pin your hopes on it yet. I'm still working on it. But Dashiell Hammett, he created the Thin Man series. And he's probably most well known for the Maltese Falcon. Let's be honest. Everybody's heard of the Maltese Falcon. But the Thin Man series. So the Thin Man, the first book he wrote. He also wrote the screenplay for the TV series. And this is one of those, the TV series outstrips the book, actually. So it's William Powell and Myrna Loy play Nick and Nora Charles. And they are some of my favorite detectives of all time. They are a married couple who solve mysteries together. The Thin Man, the first book, and then Dashiell Hammett helped write the screenplay for the series, and then the next 2 or 3 screenplays. There's actually 4 or 5 movies in the Thin Man series. This is old, black and white, classic, right after Prohibition, so they drink constantly. But it's very, it's so witty. The banter between the two of them is my goal in life, is to have a married couple detective series where they banter the way that those two do, because it's phenomenal. It's so good. And the mysteries are usually pretty good too. As you can probably tell, I'm very character centric. My stories are character centric. It's all about the characters. And then the mystery is secondary. But I do love the mystery part too. So I had the honor of working with Steve Seville, who is one of the co-authors of this rewriting of Sherlock Holmes. So I absolutely recommend his books, Stephen Seville. He also writes science fiction and fantasy. I worked with him in my past as an editor, and he's one of the authors that I still keep in touch with, that I love talking to. He has incredible thoughts and ideas. His books are amazing. The other one is William H. Keith, who's a hard science fiction author. He wrote Free Fall, which was one of the first, if not the first, it might have been the actual first one that got published, novel that I worked with. So I worked with FFG, which is now owned by, Fantasy Flight Games, they're now owned by Asmodee. They wanted to launch a whole fiction department, and I was part of that. I was the fiction department. So I got to work with William H. Keith on that. And he's the one who so wonderfully gave me my very first endorsement for my book, because he had written Free Fall. So he's a New York Times bestselling author. He wrote Free Fall, which is a noir detective mystery in a futuristic setting. It's wonderful. It is so good. And if you're familiar with Blade Runner or any of that type of story, even The Martian, you would love this. It's very good, and it's lots of references to Blade Runner. In fact, the main character is Rick Harrison. So let me know if you know what that reference is. But lots of references in there. And he was so much fun to work with. The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Dickens. Not one of my favorites, but it is his mystery where he invented, I think is it Buttons, Detective Buttons, or Bucket, maybe Bucket, is his detective in that one. I never can pronounce her name right. Nagaya Marsh, New Zealand. Yeah, she's a New Zealand author, and she's another one kind of like Agatha Christie. If you like Agatha Christie, probably gonna like her books. Very, very good. Elizabeth Peters, she writes, so her first one is Crocodile on the Sandbank. And then there's a whole series. Speaking of detective couples that solve mysteries, that's who her leads are. So if you enjoy the Agatha Christie novels where it's set in Egypt and about archaeology and about the history of the Egyptians and about her. It's inspired by her and her husband, right? Her second husband, and all of their time in Egypt. You will love Elizabeth Peters. She's amazing. And just so much fun to read. And the main character is a woman in this time period. And it's fascinating to read those. Anne Perry. Anne Perry has lots of different series. But my favorite right now is the one with Monk, Detective Monk. No relation to the monk of OCD-ness, but that's another good series. This is Monk. His very first one is called The Face of a Stranger. And it's not giving anything away to say that it begins with he is waking from amnesia. He doesn't remember who he is or what has happened or what mystery he was trying to solve. And then it goes from there. Set in my time period in the early 1900s, late 1800s, actually, I think is when it starts. Excellent series of books. It's another one where Anne Perry is a craftsman at incorporating history where she needs to and focusing on characters when she needs to. Absolutely love her books. Like I said, Dorothy L. Sayers. Strong Poison is one of the two that I actually own right now. I love listening to these as audiobooks. They're very, very good. Dorothy L. Sayers, again, is a contemporary of Agatha Christie. Of course, I've got all my Agatha Christies there. She's definitely influential. But Dorothy L. Sayers is one I didn't discover till recently. My editor friend, actually, from Whitworth, he was like, okay, your writing is a lot like Dorothy L. Sayers. Have you ever read her before? And I was like, no. So he told me to read Gaudy Night first, which is definitely my favorite one. However, Strong Poison is the first introduction of Harriet Vane. So if you were going to start, I would actually recommend this one first. Strong Poison is also fun because it is absolutely inspired by Agatha Christie or by Anna Catherine Green's first novel. There she is again, by the Leavenworth case, which opens in a courtroom with the coroner. And this is actually in a courtroom, and that's how it opens. And very, very good. So Lord Peter Wimsey is her main detective. He's very fun and wonderful. He and his Batman, who is now his valet. What I like about Lord Peter Wimsey is, unlike Poirot or Miss Marple or even Father Brown from that time period, a lot of the authors of that time, their main detectives are static, which means they don't change from book to book. Poirot is the same in every single book. You can't tell if he's gotten older or younger since the last mystery, which means you can read them in any order, which is awesome, right? Except for the very last one, Curtain. You have to read that one last. But all the others, and you really should read Murder, oh my gosh, what's the Mysterious Affair at Styles is the first one. So you really should read each of those bookending the Poirot series. But other than that, you can really read them in any order. They don't change. Hastings, his counterpart, sometimes, whether they're married or not, or, that kind of thing will change, but it's really, you can pick it up at any time. Lord Peter Wimsey changes through the course of the books, especially when he meets Harriet Vane. And part of that is when Dorothy L. Sayers was writing about Harriet Vane, she didn't feel that she was worthy of Lord Peter Wimsey, or actually vice versa. Lord Peter Wimsey was not worthy of Harriet Vane, so he needed to change. So his character changes. But one of the main things about Lord Peter Wimsey is he suffers from PTSD from the war. And as hard as that is to read sometimes, it's true. It is more true than some of the characters you'll read about in other books, right? Watson never deals with PTSD from his time overseas. Hastings, not really. Lord Peter Wimsey does. That's why his Batman is still there, is still his valet, Bunter. And their relationship is very Frodo and Sam-esque. It's that level of relationship where you're just like, wow, they are really there for each other. It's really beautiful. So, and then we meet Harriet Vane, who is a murder mystery author. And so it's one of those, it's like how Agatha Christie included, I'm blanking on her name right now, but her character was basically her in her books. So yeah, so Dorothy L. Sayers, especially if you like Agatha Christie and you're like, I need something a little bit different. She's amazing. So Agatha Christie. Eventually, I'll be doing a video where I'm going to tier rank all the Agatha Christie books that I've read. I think I've read almost all of them. There are a few. I definitely haven't read all the ones under her pseudonym, but under her actual name, under Agatha Christie, I think I've read almost all of them. I've read all the Poirots, all the Miss Marples, all the Tommy and Tuppence, and that's another couple who solves murder mysteries that are often overlooked. Of course, And Then There Were None is one of my favorite mysteries of all time. Okay, and then this shelf up here. So these are all names you've probably heard of. These ones are more modern authors, except for this one. So we'll start with this one. Maurice Leblanc is the author of the Arsène Lupin series. Now, they're technically mysteries, but they're also very much thief stories. And again, if you read my book, you know that I love thieves, Robin Hood, and all of that. So Arsène Lupin is an amazing character who I only recently discovered because of the TV series. So there is a French TV series of Lupin, and you might have seen it. It's just Lupin, Lupin. It's pronounced Lupin. And it's a modern retelling of the very first book, The Gentleman Thief, of Arsène Lupin. Now, this is actually only some of the books. And this is actually what I got from Yola Bokaflod this year for Christmas from my wonderful, incredible husband. Was this? So now I have actual copies of them. They are incredible. Now, you'll notice, this is what I love about this series, is they are contemporaries of Sherlock Holmes, of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So much so that the second book is called Arsène Lupin versus Sherlock Sholmes, not to be mistaken with Sherlock Holmes, because we don't want any copyright laws. So this came out originally as versus Sherlock Holmes. The first one of the short stories in here is him versus Sherlock Holmes. And it was basically a response to the creation of Sherlock Holmes by the French saying, okay, you're going to be inspired by our detectives. We're going to do you one better and have a thief who always outsmarts Sherlock Holmes. Well, there weren't exactly copyright laws at that time. They were just coming into effect. Like, they existed, but were they really tight on it? Not really. So they changed his name. Now, in American versions of this, it goes one step further, and it's Hemlock Sholmes. But it's still so similar. It's like, oh my gosh. So Hemlock Sholmes, or Herlock Sholmes, versus Arsène Lupin. And of course, he's the thief, and he always outwits Sholmes. And Sholmes is joined by, it's not Watson. What's his name? His counterpart. And it's very much, oh my gosh, it's not a very positive look at those two characters. Let's just say that. It's very much, he's always, just doing whatever Sholmes tells him to, and oh gosh, golly gee, how are we going to solve this? So these are really fun. The first one is Arsène Lupin, Gentleman Detective. It's a series of short stories. Highly recommend that you start with those because they're just a good taste tester. They all run together kind of, and they're just really fun. You can also find them as audiobooks. Very, very good listening. Okay, so we got Jekyll and Hyde. I already mentioned that. Okay, A.A. Milne. So one of those lesser known. So A.A. Milne, the author of Winnie the Pooh, right? My favorite book of all time. He wrote a murder mystery. It's called The Red House Mystery. Not only that, he was a contemporary of Agatha Christie, G.K. Chesterton, Dorothy L. Sayers. He was actually a member of the Detective Club along with them. And he wrote this as a challenge. They were challenged to write a murder mystery in which, I forget what the actual challenge was. It says somewhere in here in the introduction. It's very good. It's very classic. It's very, like, you might even figure it out before the end. But it's not long. It's a nice, short, quick, fun read set in Britain. And it's a murder. It's a manor house mystery, right? So just very classic, very, very good. And it's just fun to think that, that he knew them and that they were talking about mystery ideas and things. And this is what came out of it. So, All right, folks, here we go. Jasper Fforde. I'm going to try to wrap this up, okay? Give me 10 minutes. Jasper Fforde, one of my all-time favorite authors of all time. So Jasper Fforde, the first ones that I read of his were the nursery crime series. So the Big Over Easy is the first one. Guess who dies? Humpty Dumpty. Now, this is set in Reading, England, but in Reading, all of the nursery tale people have appeared there. So they exist there. The lead investigator, his name is Jack Sprat, but he's a jack of all trades. He's a jack of all stories. There's 2 books in this series. Jasper Fforde has promised a 3rd book for like 30 years now. So I keep, every time I catch him, I follow him on Instagram and stuff. I'm always like, okay, you need to write the 3rd one because it's so good. They are very tongue-in-cheek, very satirical. It's all nursery rhymes, all nursery crimes mixed together, right? So, if Humpty Dumpty fell off his wall and he cracked and all the king's men and all the king's horses couldn't put him together again, what kind of story would that be, right? Well, the second one's called The Fourth Bear, and it has to do with Goldilocks and the 3 bears. And it's a world with anthropomorphic bears. And so they're always, doing secret deals of honey and purge, and they're trying to sneak it, and they're busting them up for getting overspent their porridge quota and stuff like that. I absolutely love them. So obviously my titles, which are twists on nursery rhymes. The very, very first version of this, and I can go into this more later, but the very first version, first draft of Butcher Baker was much more like this story. I'm very glad where it ended up. I'm very happy that they are now historical mysteries. But if you find the very first version, it's actually a twisted nursery rhyme, which kind of explains some of where the baker comes from, but not quite. So, because it's changed a lot. So, excellent series. His other main one that has 7 or 8 books in it now is the Thursday Next series, which begins with the Eyre Affair. Now, I'm going to caveat this with, I don't like Jane Eyre. Sorry. It is one of those classics that I don't actually really enjoy. Read it in college, because I had to. So I put off reading the series for a long time because I was like, well, but I don't like the book. But people kept telling me, you have to read this series. If you love Jasper Fforde, you have to read the Thursday Next series because it's about a literary detective. Her job is she ends up going into books and solving mysteries in the books. And each one goes a little bit deeper into jurisfiction and the way the literary world works, because it's actually not like the authors put the words on the page, when the characters are actually like acting out the scenes. And so there's things happening behind the scenes, right? What happens when Jane goes around the corner, or what happens when Moby Dick goes under the water, things like that. It's fascinating. Really, really good series. And then his other one that I absolutely love, and he's supposedly working on the second one, and it's going to come out this year, is Shades of Grey, not to be mixed with the other Shades of Grey. Has nothing to do with that. This one is for my science fiction fantasy nerds. Fantasy more than science fiction. It's a world, possibly ours in the future, who knows, where society is divided by what color you can see. So it's all on the color spectrum. So as I recall, red is the lowest and purple is the highest, right? Violet, indigo is the highest. And it's about a red and his place in society, and he meets a gray. So grays can't see anything, they're colorblind. So fascinating, and so many amazing topics of discussion for treating people that are different than you. Very, very good book. And it came out, long time ago. 2010, so long ago. Anyway, 2010. Amazing, amazing book. Very thought-provoking and satirical. That's what I love about satire, is that it is very thought-provoking in a funny way. Oh, let's just laugh about this, but also let's take a look at this. Let's think about this. Absolutely love that. Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. You might have heard of this one. It was made into a movie with Sean Connery and blanking on the younger kid's name. It is so before Cadfile, which is another series that I love that I unfortunately don't own any copies of. The Cadfile mystery series are a monk who solves mysteries in the 1200s, I think it is. Same time as Pillars of the Earth, same time period, because it's dealing with Stephen and Maud and all of that. Name of the Rose, I actually forget exactly when it takes place, but it's the Franciscans, and it's a monk who solves a murder mystery at a monastery. And it was originally written in Italian. Amazing author. It's so much fun reading books written by people from other countries because the point of view is so different. The worldview is so different. And this is one of my favorite, just really serious, thick reads. You know, this is really good murder mystery, but also incredibly historical. Just beautiful, just beautiful. Okay. Last couple. Funny series by Spencer Quinn, Doggone It. This is the Chet and Bernie series. This is the series. This is my comfort read. This is, these books are all told by Chet. And Chet is a dog. And he's so funny. He's the cutest dog in the world. And he helps his owner, Bernie, solve mysteries at the little detective agency. And he is just the funniest dog. And it's so good. These books are so good. They're fun and whimsical and just relaxing and mostly clean. I would say, I warn you, there's language in this one. But other than the language, they're actually pretty clean. And just wonderful series. And there's, I think I just read the 12th or 13th one. I mean, they just keep going. He just keeps writing them. And then he's actually started a young adult series with, I think the first one's Arf or Woof. And that's another series. And again, told from the perspective of the dog, because he really gets the dog's point of view. He really gets it. Reminds me a lot of my dog. So if she solved murder mysteries, they would sound like this. So, of course, the Thursday Murder Club. This one's been buzzing around lately. It's definitely one of my favorite newest novels of all time. Richard Osman. There's 3 of them out now. The third one just came out. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. Really want to. Man Who Died Twice is the second one. These are wonderfully witty. Again, it's that British wit. They're just so well written. It's retirees who solve a murder. They usually get together to try to solve cold case murders. And one day, one of them actually, it involves them. And again, it's the characters, the way he captures each of their very different viewpoints. They've all lived. These are folks who have, in their 70s and 80s. They have maybe 60s. The youngest one might be in her 60s. Different points of view, fascinating conversations, and just, I love this movement towards, I guess you would say older than me, detectives. Because, there is nothing new under the sun, and history repeats itself, and we can have so much to learn from people who have been on this earth longer than we have. And then Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. Anything by Anthony Horowitz. Excellent books. Very, very, very good. Okay, I think that's my mystery books. All right, so I'm going to take some last questions, and then we'll have to say goodbye. I zoomed through all 3 by Richard Osman. Absolutely. They're so good. Let's see. Are there 3? Yes. Are there only 3? I've only read the first one. Yes, the Nursing Home Mysteries. The Richard Osman. Yeah, the third one just came out. So it's definitely high on my to read books. Yeah. Let's see. Yes. Yeah. Free fall. Does that have the elevator thing to space? Yes. It's called the Beanstalk. Android is actually a like 14-hour game, board game that you can play. And if you're really into the world, it's very, very fun because it's basically solving a mystery as one of the main characters. There was another series by Mel Odom. Oh, I don't have those out. But he wrote a trilogy that was really good. It was the Identity trilogy. I definitely need to have those out on my shelf because my books deal with identity a lot as well. And his are from these different futuristic characters. The first one is an android, and which is like if you like Martha Wells and her Murderbot series, you'll love Mel Odom's series. The first one I think is called Identity. Maybe not. No, the first one's, I'll have to look it up. But yeah. All right. Oh, definition of a cozy mystery. So cozy mystery versus a like a historical mystery. Real quick. So a cozy mystery, it started by describing Agatha Christie's books. So books that are comfort reads, that are clean. So there's no of the big three. The three things that if you're reading certain fiction, cozy mysteries do not have those. They are very clean, and so they're readable by anybody. The murder generally happens off screen. So I've had some discussions with people whether my books are considered cozy mysteries or not. In some ways they are, and in some ways they aren't. So yeah, but I avoid grotesque. I avoid language. It's part of why I chose 1901. It is a more etiquette-based society. There's lots of rules of what you can say and what you can't say, and it just, it was just naturally that way. Everybody went to church on Sunday, whether they believed it or not, because that's just what you did. And yeah, so I like cozy mysteries. That's what I write. But mine are generally considered historical mysteries just because they're not set in modern day. A cozy mystery is generally one that is set in modern day. So the Thursday Murder Club, Doggone It, all of those. I mean, I guess Doggone It really isn't because there is language in that one, definitely. Because it always surprises me when I pick it up and I'm like, oh, okay, that's right. But like Anne Perry's books, those are historical mystery because she's chosen that time period, they're like mine. They're very clean. Yeah. So cozy historical mystery, it's one of those when you start talking genre, it's hard because everybody has a different definition. The difference between science fiction and fantasy is also a very interesting line. So, which ties into next week. So next week I will be doing a live, no, it won't be live, but I'll be posting a video about my past as a science fiction fantasy editor. So if you're interested in that, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and hit the notification bell so you'll hear the next time I post a video. My goal is to post them every Friday, and then I will go live every last Saturday of the month. So like I said, be sure to join me this last Saturday. I'll be doing a bake along with Amy Marie. So excited to do that. And then there'll be a couple videos in between there, science fiction and fantasy to historical mystery author. What does that look like? And then my favorite detectives that are not Sherlock that I think are better than Sherlock. And then next month I've got even more planned. So very excited. If you're local, check me out at Colorado Springs Science Fiction Convention, which is happening January 20th to the 23rd. Because of science fiction and fantasy, I will be steampunking my normal garb. I'll be there supporting my husband, who also writes epic fantasy. Definitely check out his books. He is Andrew D. Meredith. And be sure to follow me everywhere. All my links are down below. And yeah, sign up for my newsletter. I've got my website. I've got Instagram and Goodreads and all that. So if you want to read my reviews of my books, of the different books that I'm reading, and follow me on my goal to read 100 books this year. I met it last year, so I'm trying it again this year. You can follow me on Goodreads. So thank you everybody for tuning in live, and thank you for those who are catching this later. I know I went a little over how long I was going for, but hopefully you found it interesting and exciting. And I would love to hear from you in the comments, what books are your favorites that I mentioned. Maybe recommend some other books, because like I said, I'm trying to read 100 books this year, so I need some recommendations. And I'm always looking for a good, clean read. And now you know a little bit more about what I like to read, what I enjoy reading. So thank you so much. I look forward to chatting more with you, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.